Welcome to the In the Middle podcast, a podcast where we talk about every avenue of life because life really takes place in the middle, not the beginning, not the end. How do we navigate the middle? Well, welcome everybody. Today I have a special guest with us. Well, I think he's special. A special guest with us. I'm going to get him to introduce himself a little, but then today we're going to get into a conversation that I know for sure every single one of you is going to have relevance to, connection to, and I hope real benefit from. So that was a big setup. So everybody, this is Lenny, and Lenny, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why are you here?
Okay. That last question is going to be tough. I am Lenny Nasca. I've been here at Grace since 2001. A lot of people don't know that, but counseling program's been around for a while. I took over in 2017. It's Grace Counseling that we do here. So I coordinate it. We run that program with mostly volunteers, as you know. We give out 10 free sessions to the community and to other churches that want to use that service. And it's grown. It's getting bigger. So part of what I do is make sure that everybody is following the rules of the state, that we have to follow. But in the training comes into play, supervision comes into play. We have to make sure that everybody is doing it for the right reasons and that the product that we give is professional. So, a lot of what I do behind the scenes with that program is make sure that it's running the way that it needs to. And we have an intern, so we have higher level of care. We have professional volunteers. And so, the goal is really just to reach out to the communities and fill the niche that's not always filled. Those that maybe can't afford it, those that don't have insurance, and those that are looking for Christian counseling and are struggling to find that. Yeah. And since we use that biblical approach, we've added modalities to that to increase the effectiveness. And so that's kind of an overview of what we do with Grace Counseling. And it's been around since 2017. So well-established, respected in the communities that are around us. They know about us. Yeah. As far as me personally, been in the field since the 90s and switched careers from law enforcement to counseling, therapy, whatever you want to call it. Had a push in that direction once I came to know Christ, which was when I was 28, so a little bit later in life. Everything that I was thinking I was going to do changed at that point, and so shifting into therapy as an occupation was where I felt he was leading me to do, kind of advocacy, and that's kind of how I ended up being here. I think
Yeah, and you spent some time even like working on ASU campus in other ways?
I've been with ASU for 25 years.
Wow, what does that look like?
It's changed a lot over the years. I got into it from the law enforcement angle. I worked for the police department for a lot of years. Did therapy there for the staff and faculty of ASU. Ran into some issues there. As the world has changed, so has the work in counseling. And so I was let go. And I remember at some point I was able to come to terms with that and recognize the capacity that God would have for me in this field. I had no idea that I was going to be in a position to take over the ministry that I took over. That was all him. That was one day it showed up and I said yes. So ASU has changed a lot. We're going to talk a little bit about that in our topic, but it's bigger, it's louder, it's faster. That about sizes it up.
Yeah, just in case we've got anybody. Well, we do have some international listeners and people from outside of Arizona. ASU is Arizona State University. Right. That their main campus is 2 miles from us, probably their main campus, less than 2 miles away, and it's currently pushing 100,000 students.
We're number one. We've got the highest population.
Largest student body in the nation.
That's correct.
And there are 15 to 20,000 international students on that campus as well. So crazy diverse. We're very blessed that is close to us, but at the same time, it brings its additional needs at the same time. So what I wanted me and Lenny to talk about today, more me ask Lenny and we'll bounce this. We both said in preparation, we are not rehearsed at all. We're going to just talk as if we were in a coffee house somewhere and see where it rolls. But I was interested, and I don't know the answer. I was interested. What are the top three issues or topics that you in counseling see, and how, and is there a pattern of the need for counseling, and really when it all comes together there seems to be common themes that weave through them all? So off the top of your head, what would be the top three issues, needs that you come into contact with, and then you can bounce off that and then go, okay, are there some commonalities here that actually, and maybe what I want us to get to stay with us is for Lenny to maybe give us some, hey, what if I personally have, are there some skills to help me in my own mental health right now? So that's where
Sure.
we might go. So
Sure.
let's talk. What are top three topics, issues that you come across?
I would differentiate from baseline mental health intervention and what you might see from a church perspective, a spiritual integration into that. So,
Right.
one of the top three things you're going to see is maladaptive interpersonal. So, people who are
It's a big
struggling.
word.
I know, I'm going to break it down.
Expand on that.
When you're in a relationship, which everyone is on some level or another, whether it be the commitment of marriage or just friendships or anything like that, what you see primarily for a lot of people is they're struggling with an interpersonal dynamic, something that is not working well for them. There's disruption in relationships, there's difficulty in relationships, there's loss of relationships. And so the number one of the thematics that you're going to see coming in our door is people struggling with how to navigate that and improve on it. They want their relationships to improve. They want them to be closer, more fulfilling, and so that would be one type of dynamic you see. Secondary type of dynamic you're going to see is an actual practical, tangible experience that people have. So that means the straightforward type of disorders: anxiety, depression, grief. You're going to have somebody come in with things that are standard. I would equate it to speeding and jaywalking. And everybody does it, but not everybody is held accountable.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
So
All right.
you have
Speeding and jaywalking.
Yeah.
Everybody does it.
yeah.
Not everybody's held
There
accountable.
you go. And so with mental health, you see a lot of anxiety. It's pervasive, but it
Right.
doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that you have to engage in therapeutically. Anxiety is a normal functioning part of what we do. Okay, so those that get overwhelmed by it may want to come in and get some skill sets on how to manage it better.
Okay.
But we never eliminate it. So that's why I use that example of the
Yeah.
speed. We never eliminate jaywalking. Everybody jaywalks.
Right.
Grief, the same way. Everybody experiences loss. Faith-based people, non-faith-based people, it's universal. You have grief come into your life unexpected versus expected. It has an effect on you. You have a reaction to it. Those that can be resilient in that reaction don't typically come in for counseling because everybody goes through grief.
Yep.
When it becomes overwhelming and you can't make sense of it, just much like the anxiety, tipping point, you come in to talk to somebody. But I put those in a different category because they're normal,
Right.
right?
Right.
Go
So
ahead. Yeah.
anxiety is normal.
It is.
So what are the benefits to the human of anxiety? I almost feel like you say, we need it to some degree, and yet to some degree it can become I don't know, people can be trapped in it. So just help me understand when people say there's real benefit to anxiety. Help me out with that one.
It's beneficial when you are using it for causation, right? So fight or flight would be the most basic way to describe it, right? When you are in a situation that requires you to act, anxiety is part of the brain's mechanism to get you to alert and to activate. And so that anxiety, that's a healthy version of it.
Right.
In the same way you could look at stress the same way.
Right.
Cars don't move without stress. It's the friction of the car that allows it to go, vroom, vroom, right? So anxiety in us is a mechanism to get us to go.
Yep.
If it's happening when you don't want it to happen, that can be problematic.
Okay.
If it's happening and you can't stop it after you've used it appropriately, that can be a problem. So for most people, you get anxious when you're anticipating or when you're worrying. So you've got past tense and you've got future tense. If you're staying present,
Yep.
you can manage the anxiety that's happening to you.
Yeah.
right? So anticipation of what could happen, worry about what has happened, those things can be unresolved, and then we get to the next level, and we might have to hold off on that or dive in. It depends. But that's where we get into the cognitive piece of it. That's where we get into what is a distortion and why does it make me cyclical think or ruminate, and then that's where the anxiety comes from. It's the manifestation of that unresolvable thought that eventually turns into anxiety, and then you start getting the idea of people saying, I feel anxious. That happens after. So I always tell people, you think anxious, then you feel anxious, right? So that's a bigger kind of, yeah.
I once heard said by somebody that anxiety isn't really something you people said, oh, I have anxiety, like it's a condition.
Right.
I have anxiety. I once heard somebody challenge that and said, well, that's not true. That's a response to it. Like lean into that because I think the word anxiety and anxiousness is, I think it's at its loudest that I can recall, especially in what I believe is the most dynamic generation we've seen for a long time in Gen Z.
Yeah, they're working it.
They are amazing, but there's this common, oh, I have anxiety. And I'm like, is that a condition or is it a state of mind or is it a response to something? Lean into that because I think we will all benefit from that conversation, even just me.
Sure.
So teach me.
The desire to label, we'll set that aside for 1 second because you mentioned it and it is a part of it.
Okay.
So the desire to label it so that it's manageable in your mind as opposed to an abstract, but we'll set that aside. There's a real desire to label stuff nowadays. The other side of that being the anxiety as I have it. So look at it this way. When you have somebody who goes unresolved with any issue, it doesn't matter what it is, right? Eating, it doesn't matter. When it goes unresolved, then you start to have things where people say, well, I have anxiety. It looks like things like phobias, panic attacks, things like this. Everyone, if you want to use that definition, everyone has anxiety. So that's why you have to be careful with it. You say, I have anxiety. Well, yeah. Yeah, everybody. Why? Because it's a natural part of the process in order to problem solve, in order to make a decision, in order to move in a direction. It's a part of it. It's no different than saying, in order for you to run, you probably have to buy the right kind of shoes, and perhaps work on endurance before you can. Anxiety is a part of a process. So, do you have it? Yes. Why do you have it? Is the better question. You have it because, again, in the brain, as the brain activates to take action, it's an anticipatory, typically, in that way, to get you to think about stuff. In some cases, to predict outcome, because you don't want to just step into the, to the ground that you don't think is level. It's more difficult for younger people to cognate farther into the future, right? Because the brain is still forming up until 25, 26. So the anticipation becomes more overwhelming.
Yep.
Because there's more to think about and less resource to know what's going to happen, as opposed to somebody who's older who hopefully has life experiences to plug in some of the gaps.
Okay.
So I make that decision to move forward with less anxiety because I've been there before. I've seen it before. I have something to recall on that causes me to be less anxiety, more calm, because I know this is a possible outcome, but I can handle it. And that gets to that resiliency part again. So less anxiety equates to I believe in myself that I can be resilient if something goes off. The younger you are, the less capacity you have to do that sort of common stock of knowledge, right? Encyclopedia kind of grab.
Yeah.
I've been there before. I know what it could look like, so I'm less afraid of that and more confident in the stepping in.
Right.
And so that's why it's a little difficult to say, well, you have anxiety, but it becomes an anxiety issue, if you want to call it that way, when you don't use it in the appropriate ways to use it, which is you have to activate it at some point. You have to do something with it. When it gets to the point of being physical, you have to do something physical intervention, deep breathing, stretching, yoga, running, some type of release of it. But it starts off in the mind, and the challenge that we teach through our therapeutic approach is to help you look at, and that was the next part of your question, I believe, is we look at it from a perspective is we say, let's challenge the distortion because we want it to be something that's resolvable. So if it's a distortion, non-resolvable, stays in your head, causes you to stay in that place, but you don't see any movement, that can start to make you feel, that's where that comes in, anxious. I'm off. I'm not feeling like I can move forward because this problem I'm having, it's still there. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it, but I'm not getting anywhere with it.
Yeah.
So the distortion challenge, we have lots of ways to do that. But the way that our faith plays into this, I think we should point this out, is that one of the techniques that we use is a cognitive-based technique. And what it basically says is that I have to challenge that thought to create some form of resolvability. And the version that I teach our folks is my thinking based on fact? Is my thinking helping me feel the way I want to feel? And is my thinking helping me reach a goal or expectation? And I have to get a yes for all three. What happens at this moment is the thought that we have is now resolvable. If it's resolvable, I don't need to go back. And before I finish that, let me give you an example.
Yes. I was
2
gonna
plus
ask for
2
that.
equals 4. 3 plus 1 equals 4. 6 minus 2 equals 4. Do I need to keep solving for 4? At some point, I have an answer, but I'm not doing anything with it. And I can overthink that, and I can continue to process that even though I have an answer. And I'm looking for a more specific 4 when I already have 4. So to tie that into Scripture, when we get into the Word, it helps us think in a way that is fact. It helps us think in a way that helps us feel the way we want to feel. And it helps us think in a way that gets us towards our goals. So there's zero conflict to allow if you want to call it a human modality, through therapy to reinforce what God can already do. Doesn't take away from your faith, doesn't interfere with the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
I always tell people, the issue you have is the Holy Spirit's not working on your dime. So when God intervenes, he intervenes. And certainly you can be in communion with that and pray for those things, but you don't know when he's going to do that. And so in the meantime, are there some things you can do to help yourself manage? Yes.
So as you're sharing, I even mentioned this recently. I think we rarely get to a point where we just go, hang about, what is true here? Like what's really going, but what is true, which is what you said. Where's the fact?
What's it
But
be?
what is true? And therefore, in a spiritual realm, we have an enemy who wants to deceive and lie. And we're entertained by those other thoughts, but what is true? Then you said about that's a thinking mindset. Then you've got the feeling mindset. So you've got your head, then your heart, and then it goes to your hands.
And then there's context, yeah.
There's the flow, which is it all interconnects with the way truth, life, faith, hope, love. It all interconnects. But that's really interesting. So answer that one because you mentioned it. So I'll go there.
Okay.
We do have a generation who seem to have a label of I have anxiety, like it's a condition. And it is a condition, maybe it's not, but just speak into that in a way, number one, to help us understand. And I'm going to say this for a Gen Xer baby boomer, that's new language. It's new language when I was seeing, hang on, I have anxiety as in a condition, like I have vertigo.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It was like, and it's something as concrete. I have this. Is that helpful? Is that true? Is that help me understand that? And for people who now say it, how does that help or not?
If I have it, then I can try to quantify it and really tell myself that there's an intervention and there's a right way to do it. It speaks to that right way, wrong way kind of thinking,
Okay.
which is one of the number one distortions. 25 distortions. That's the first one. Is that there's a wrong way to do this and a right way to do this. The idea that you have anxiety. So when we talk about the number one distortion is that something is thought to be true. So you get a lot of yes answers for that one, right? My thinking is based on something that's fact, and they say yes to that. And then when they get to the second two questions, they get no's. And so to that end, if I can label it, which is also one of the 25,
Yeah.
if I can label it, then I can tell myself this is what it is. Now, what does that do? I say on the positive and negative. It takes me away from having to be resilient. I'll use that word again. If I have to rely on what I have access to, I have access to my faith, I have access to my support system, I have access to worship, I have access to exercise, I have access to knowledge. If I am using those things and I'm creating a platform to believe in myself, I create resiliency. I don't have to have anxiety because I can work through it.
Right.
If I need to label it sometimes, not all the time, sometimes it gives you permission. It gives you an excuse to say, because I have this thing, limit me.
Okay.
Or you can limit me. Even if it's self-diagnosed, limit me, or if it's someone else putting a limit, you can get away with that because now you've called it something.
Mm-hmm.
And more so, not even with anxiety, you see it with some of the more severe diagnoses that you could have. People are looking to have a personality disorder. People are looking to be bipolar. And
Yeah.
looking for it because it tells them, oh, I'm this. And so that makes it better because it's a thing that you can claim. And the problem with that is why would you want to claim that? What's causing you to claim that as your own? In the old days, I know with the older generations, don't claim that pain or don't claim that health issue. And in some ways, the labeling of it makes people feel better on the surface to say, I have this thing, so be kind to me, treat me with grace, treat me a certain way. But what it does is it negates the ability for you to overcome it. It negates the resiliency that we all have.
Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. Oh, hang on. You just said something big. That's key. So when people, and we see it, go, they want to give the label, to some degree, it makes them, this is why I'm thinking this way. This is why I'm behaving this way. But then you said, but it negates, sometimes it negates that, but they don't want to work through then or come through a breakthrough, or it's like, well, this is what I've got, therefore I cannot do anything about it. The good side is I've got it, so now I want to do something about it.
Right.
The other side, well, I've got it, so this is the way I am, so therefore, so that, that's a
well, but think about it. If
dynamic
you try
tension.
something and fail, so
Yeah,
it goes back
yeah.
to if you try something and you fail, it feels a heck of a lot worse than if you don't try at all.
Correct.
Because if I fail and I haven't really put my effort in, I've got the back door exit. Well, I didn't really put everything into it. So in the same context, I have this thing that inhibits me. So that's my back door. So there's a reason why I couldn't engage as much as you could. There's a reason why I couldn't do it as intensely as you could, because I have this thing that causes me social anxiety, right? Somebody who doesn't want to speak socially or doesn't want to stand in front of people and speak. Well, okay, great. You can avoid it, given certain occupations. You'll never have to do it. You can never have to speak. But it comes with the label of I've given myself permission to not ever try or work at it. And I like I said before, God's timing, God's plan, completely out of my control. And there may be a time when I have to speak, and I might have to speak to a bunch of people, and I can't. And something we would run into back in my old days of law enforcement is the ability to, the first two levels of force continuum is command, presence, and verbal control. And it's not lost on me or anyone who's in that field to say that the first two things that happen in an interaction with that particular occupation is you see me and you hear me. And so again, when you translate that to the person, we don't know when we might have to be the one that has to speak into something and has to be present when someone is suffering.
Right.
And I think that that's the challenge, to believe that, wait a minute, even if I don't like doing it, I have a capacity to do it. And maybe I want to get better at that and not just use it as an exit strategy. So I think that's the deeper level to that.
So for a person who comes and they say, I have anxiety, what's the response to that? Is it yes, or actually, what is a response to that? I have anxiety. Ugh, it's for the person listening to this, where they're probably hearing that and seeing that in a person. Like, what do we do with that?
I mean, I'd say yes. You have some some anxiety, but let's talk about where it's coming from. It's no different than if I said I'm angry all the time.
Okay.
Okay. Well, anger has a purpose.
Right.
It has a purpose.
Yes.
You use it for something, but you need to recognize what it's for and what.
But
it's
not a
keeping you from.
diagnosis of my
It's not
mental
a diagnosis
thinking.
of anything. Yeah.
Right.
I have anger, but yeah, you have anger because it's a boundary maker. It keeps you safe. But when we break that down, you don't need it. You'll stop being angry. And anxiety, the same kind of thing. If I can regulate myself in this way, if I can challenge the thinking that's causing me to ruminate on a problem, which inevitably physical takes over, I can manage the symptoms. I don't have to be as anxious. And that's, again, you're going to be anxious, but not as anxious. Well, it becomes functional at some point. That's what we're looking to do. We're never looking to take it away from somebody. They say they have anxiety. I said, yeah, you do. Welcome to the team. Do you want to manage it better? That's my question back to them. Do you want to manage it better? Is it interrupting you? Is it messing with your functioning? They say yes usually. I say, okay, well let's work on a way to
Yeah.
manage that.
Because they've come for help, which is great. That's the first big
Yeah.
breakthrough. You've mentioned a word now a few times, resiliency. It builds resiliency.
Right.
You've mentioned that. Go on, freestyle.
Okay.
Well, let's lean into that. And I think that's really key.
You come to therapy to change. You don't come to therapy to stay the same. So if your resiliency is the mechanism that we call it to be able to get through that yourself, so you don't need a therapist anymore. You know, if you got a plumber comes to the house, the plumber fixed the pipe. You're not expecting the plumber to come back in a week. That shouldn't work that way. Some people in therapy don't necessarily look at it this way.
You're
but I
giving
look,
me anxiety because we had drains issues a few weeks ago that ruined our life for
but
10
if
days.
they do it right,
We've not seen him since. It's a
okay,
success.
good.
Thanks.
And therapy's the same way. You come in to change. That means I'm going to try to give you a set of skill sets. I'm going to challenge the way you think about it. I'm going to guide you through a process to think about it differently. And the goal is to get you better equipped. You're
Right.
going to rely on your ability to navigate a problem without having to process it. But it's a beautiful thing to be able to process it. You know, the beauty of the therapy is I'm a neutral perspective. I'm not in love with the client, but they'll come in as a couple in love with each other, struggling with the pain that comes from loving someone. And, you know, again, topic for another day.
Yeah.
The vulnerability
Yeah.
to love comes with risk. So I don't have that issue because I'm not going home with them and I'm not in love with them.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So neutrally, I can speak to them and I can guide them through a way to communicate what they're feeling because it's legit. Same thing with anxiety or
Yep.
any of these other conditions. You're coming in to process that information to learn how to do it differently. So change is what you're looking for. And the necessity of that is it's a little bit painful because emotions come out when you start to,
Right.
right?
Right.
And the idea is they leave with a different way to process that information, challenge it, that reduces the anxiety. Now it's more manageable, but it never goes away. So again, that's my answer to that. They come in, the purpose is to change. It's hurting you, it's affecting you negatively. You have anxiety that goes undiagnosed long enough where you're not doing anything with it, that's when we start to see the deeper levels. Like I said, the phobias, the panic attacks, things like that. Those are different. Straight up anxiety, and here's another reason, and I have to bring it up because it's just here. We're talking about the younger generations. When you are exposed to more than you can handle, which
Yep.
they are
Yep.
because of that little device, you get anxiety because you know more than you can do with. It's just inevitable.
I just this morning, I've got a new audiobook, and he mentions that we are disciples of the internet. The problem is our soul cannot take that much information
Concur.
in one go. We cannot. So in one sense, we've got this wonderful tool, but the impact of it on our soul is causing all of these fears. Now, how is resilience built? How is resilience built? Because you're mentioning they're coming with a pain. It's like we all want to avoid pain,
Yeah, but that's
But-
part of the problem, though.
and so therefore, how is resilience built?
Suffering increases hope, and I mean,
Okay.
you can't avoid that stuff. To get through something that is causing you dysfunction or disrupting your life, you cannot put a Band-Aid on that. You have to explore foundationally why you got there in the first place. This is the pain of it all. If you I use the analogy again like a broken arm. They put a cast on it. You can't use it for 6 weeks. They don't simply take the cast off and you go back to doing things. You have to rehabilitate what was lost under the cast. It's just the bones healed, but the
Right.
arm's all skinny and flabby and whatnot.
Right, right.
It's got work to do. That scares people.
Yeah.
Again, exit strategy. If I don't address this completely, then I don't have to deal with it completely. That's the opposite of resiliency, right? The idea that you can suffer and survive it is how we grow. Testimony to give to another human being, whether they be believers or secular, is my ability to be able to tell them the brokenness that I experience on a regular basis and the assistance and guidance I get from my Lord. to get me through that requires that I be vulnerable to it, not avoid it. And again, that's a hard, you can't make people do that.
Right.
They have to choose that.
Right.
Right? You don't, you know,
Right.
you got one door with a flamethrower and another door with knives. You got to pick one. They're like, where's the third door with nothing? I'm like, there's no third door. You're going to get burnt or cut. Which one would you like? And it throws them off because it's like, well,
Sure.
wait a minute. One of
Sure.
those doors, it's a green pasture and there's
Yeah.
kittens and puppies waiting for me. I'm like, I haven't seen that one, and God didn't promise you that one. So let's slow this down and recognize this hurts. And it's okay that it hurts, but now what do we do? And this is I mean, I hate to say it, like, I'm not trying to make it simple, but this is the challenge we all have. We are fighting against you know, good old Adam and Eve. We're fighting against that brokenness that's built
Yes.
into us.
Yes.
God helps you, but you still carry a lot of that crapola, if I can say that on the podcast.
You just did, and I'm perfectly okay with that. With that Italian New York word you
That's
just made
me.
up. You know.
No, I didn't make that up. That's a real word.
Yeah.
And so you carry that. And again, therapy is just one avenue where we're trying to help you tap into the skills you've been given. Every emotion has a purpose. We're going to try to guide you to that purpose because it's not happening to you. That's the thing, right? You already touched on that. It's not. I don't have anxiety. It's not
Right.
happening to me.
Right.
It's a part of what God gave us to navigate.
Got it.
Fleshy guy. That's we're navigating it.
Got it.
Yeah.
And so, really, it sounds like to me is this thing of therapy is actually this is me discovering the skills and the tools to build resiliency.
Correct. Yeah.
You know, to be able to look at life and know that I can get through this,
Yeah.
or help me get through this.
Wait, God gets you through the storm if you can handle the pulling, something along those lines, right? There's a
You know.
cliche
Yeah.
thing that's out there, right?
Yeah.
You're going to go through it. Can you get through it on the other
Yeah.
end? Grief.
Yeah.
Let's use that as an example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Grief Share exists to help people, assist them through a process that most people would prefer not to have to deal with. It hurts to lose something,
Yeah.
to have had access and then have access removed. And part of that journey is saying, I still have access. It's just not the same as it was. The tangible piece got removed, but I have my memory. I'm 50% of the relationship. And that's what I'm building on at that point. And who am I giving that to? Who else is going to benefit from what I learned from that person?
Do you see any behaviors in people who seem to manage grief? Because you're managing it. Do you see any behaviors that you know, oh no, this is a really healthy way to manage grief as opposed to unhealthy? I know it's a big subject.
Yeah.
Okay, it's close to my heart.
I can
you
connect
know,
it to
so-
anxiety, but I can also, I respect the fact that, yeah, you're speaking from that place. The grief doesn't have a timeline.
Right.
And the traditional 5 stages don't have order except for the 5th. So the acceptance phase is the only one that has an order to it. That's the 5th stage. The other 4 don't have an order, a time limit, or any. So the designation of denial, negotiation. Sorry, I'm saying it fast.
No, just
Denial,
give the 5 for
yeah,
the listeners.
denial, negotiation, anger, and sadness, right? They don't have an order and they don't have a timeline. When you are done with grief, acceptance will creep its way in, however that looks for that person. When it doesn't creep in because you haven't fully engaged, this is again the avoidance thing. I don't want to be angry all the way. I don't want to be sad all the way. I don't want to try to negotiate with God because I feel it's futile and I don't want to be mad at him. I don't want to go into denial because I feel like I'm losing myself to the denial. And so there's all these little habits that we have to restrict ourselves from being vulnerable. Again, it's that whole, I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want to feel weak. For men, it might be a little bit harder because of those other things.
Yeah.
But grief in and of itself is what God gave us to be able to move forward. Without it, we would be screwed.
Yep.
Without guilt, we would be really in bad shape. And
Yep.
so this is how you have to reframe the way you look at it.
Right.
The grief is actually helping you.
Yep.
When you don't process it, guess what happens? You get another loss.
Yep.
And now you have 2. Then you get a 3rd one, and now we get into complex grief. Or there's different names for it, but complexity of grief. When you have multiple griefs at different stages, now you're experiencing anger, sadness, denial, negotiation for 4 different reasons, 4 different timelines, and it starts to take its toll.
Right.
So the better answer is, actually, why don't I why don't I go ahead and experience this
Mm.
and lessen the suck, as it would be,
Mm-hmm.
and deal with what's happening, because that's what God gave you to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard for people to do.
So I'm conscious that some of you are like, oh, can we talk about this? Talk about this. I'm going to let you know. I think we may do a series of interviews with Lenny here because of the subject matter.
Amen.
One of the things that I love right now in our current generation, in Gen Z, is for some of them, they are intentionally wired to do hard things.
Yeah.
There's an attraction to resiliency. There's an attraction to, I want to get stronger. I want to be able to break through this. There's a real attraction to this. There are those who, there's a fire, I want to go into it for the benefit of somebody else. There is that drive and desire. And so this what I don't like it when they just, oh, Gen Z are all flaky. I'm going, that's not true.
No, there's a lot of solid.
There's some incredible, like, yeah. I mean, the camera won't see it, but in this room we've got a Gen Zer who will use the phrase, "No, sometimes you just got to do hard things."
And the alphas are
and
on
she
the way,
will
by the
there.
way.
The what?
Z's are being removed already by the alphas. They're
The
already on the
alphas,
way.
yeah.
But to speak to that, there's nothing wrong with the challenge. If they've got God, if they're bringing God into it, if they're
Yeah.
because there's no communication that's idle, right? If you don't bring God, the enemy takes up a seat, right? All
Right.
these old cliches. But so you bring God into the idea of pushing yourself and striving for something and risking something. I think it's great. I think it's a pendulum swing from the generation before. So you see that a lot.
Oh, yeah, you
right?
do.
You see
Yeah,
that
you do.
a lot.
Yeah, you do.
So now they're pendulum swinging back, saying, "Wait a minute. We're not just going to follow everything that you tell us to follow. That's beautiful."
Right.
And so, again, the risk is fine, but there is ways to manage that, right? There's risk assessments that we could cover at some point, but
Okay.
there's, high frequency, low frequency, high risk, low risk, all that stuff. You have the ability to risk because when you're young, you have the ability to expose yourself to things on a more natural level, right? Why do we get primed to date and explore all of that stuff when we're young? Because it's not restricted. Right?
Right.
MTV doesn't have a show full of 40-year-olds sitting around going, "What are we going to do tonight?" I don't know, watch TV.
Yeah.
Right? It's not intended for us. It's intended for 20-somethings because they can get them to do things. Unfortunately, they usually use it to do negative things.
Right.
But on the same token, that same type of personality is what gets them to do the positive things.
Yep.
It's I'm willing to share
Yep.
my faith with somebody.
Yes.
I'm willing to sing out loud even though I'm not, on American Idol or whatever.
Yep.
I'm willing to volunteer my time even though
Yep.
my time is super valuable when I'm 25 years old.
Right.
I mean, I'm prime time. That's valuable stuff. But that's great.
Yeah.
That's the good side of it.
It is a good side
Yeah.
of it. It really is. So in closing this episode, this whole area, and we've kind of focused a little bit kind of on anxiety, and you mentioned grief, which is why I want us to get into again. You've mentioned anxiety.
And one more thing, just
Go on.
the maladaptive interpersonal stuff. There's a specific for male and female. We can tackle it later.
Okay.
The access to the social media, the men are tending to be exposed to pornography, and the women are learning maladaptive interpersonal skills that are causing things like, say, codependency. So those would be the specifics to.
Okay, that's another episode.
I know.
I would love for
but
us
I
to.
had to say it though because
let's do it. Yeah,
that
let's
was my
bake
third
that.
major thing that comes up at the very beginning, and we talked about it.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that's popping up. We're getting young people with similar flavors.
Very interesting.
So yeah, but I didn't go into it because
No, well, let's cover that. And I think you're right when it comes to the whole area of social media and the whole access to the.
But how it's affecting the
the
interpersonal
information.
dynamic.
It's affecting our personal relationships.
Correct. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But I had
No,
to
I
throw
love
in.
it. I love it. Okay, so for today,
Yeah.
we talked about the anxiety one probably the most. So, just with our listeners, what would you say to a person who is currently, recurringly in a state of anxiety that they're feeling unhealthy with? Advice, tips, any words you want to give in closing?
Find a place you can sit down and breathe. Before you try to engage in your intellect, slow your heart rate down, slow your breathing down, deep breathe from your abdomen,
Yeah.
in through the nose, out through the mouth and get your stomach. You should feel your stomach puffing in and out. For me, that's
Yep.
easy because I'm kind of
Diaphragm out. Yeah.
get that stomach going. That deep breathing slows you down. Then you can sit down and get out what is your go-to scripture? What is your go-to music? I'm a music guy. There are songs that I need to listen to calm me down. I know you're a music guy 'cause you sing sometimes for us very wonderfully. So these are things that you have to do once you've gotten yourself calm. So the first thing I tell you, if you're driving, I don't care if you get off the freeway,
Right.
park, breathe. It's worth it. It's worth it. If you're at home, I understand we have responsibilities, we have children, but you can still breathe while you're holding a child. You can breathe.
There you go.
have to slow yourself down physically. That would be my little tip.
Beautiful.
And then at some point, pursue follow-up, try to talk to somebody.
Yeah. That's super helpful.
Yeah.
I think we've unlocked something here, guys. I want to kind of know more. It's just really great, Lenny. So we're going to be doing this again. Yeah, I think if you're up for it, maybe next episode, actually, we may just want to do a series.
I want
in a row.
I want to benefit.
I think
our
there could be some
population.
momentum with that. And one of the reasons that I called this podcast In the Middle is this is exactly it. You know, this is not where you started, but you find yourself here in this particular situation. Yeah. And we want to get to the other side and build the resiliency. But let's just look at each thing. And so, yeah, you're not alone out there.
No.
Thanks for listening to us to In the Middle this week. Join us for our next episode. We'll get Lenny on again, and we'll do this. Thanks, Lenny, for your time.
Welcome. Thank you.
Anything specific you want to do, reach out to us with questions
make a
or
comment,
comments.
ask for topics.
And we will engage in that. Awesome. All right, everybody. See you soon.